Superman 2 is pretty much the Murphy's Law equivalent of any movie. I'm not saying that every single thing about Superman 2 it went wrong or was bad. I'm saying that every single thing about the production of Superman 2 went wrong and was bad. And to give you guys a better understanding of that, I'm going to be talking about the production of Superman 2 before I actually get into both versions of Superman 2. And why is that, you may ask? Well, because it kind of explains why we have both versions of Superman 2. So, with that said, let's get started. Now, Richard Donner was pretty much set and ready to do both Superman 1 and Superman 2. He had began production on both these movies in 1977 and pretty much filmed both movies and got both movies done pretty much back to back. Now, during production, he focused more of his intentions and more of his time on Superman 2 than on Superman 1. He finished about 75 to 80% of Superman 2, but then production was halted because Superman 2 was not done yet, and the release date for that movie was approaching fast. So, they halted production on Superman 2, went and finished Superman 1, and then released Superman 1. And during the time that Superman 1, was, out and people were loving it, Richard Donner was fired because, the next logical step in making a sequel to a really successful Superman or superhero movie is to fire the guy that pretty much made that happen, the director. Makes sense to me. Why are you looking at me weird? That totally makes sense. And there are many reasons to why Donner was let go and the reason why Lester was hired for the job of directing Superman 2. One of those reasons being the escalating budget of Superman 1. During the production of Superman 1, there was many different techniques that had to be made in order to get the movie off the ground, and there were many different things that the movie had to do financially in order for the movie to get made, so the budget just kept on rising and kept on rising, and that's the reason why the Salkinds or the producers had, fired him for it. Another reason was due to the creative differences, not of Superman 1, but of Superman 2. Superman 2, to the Salkinds wanted Superman 2 to be a lot more campy and a lot more slapsticky, or is that even a word, slapsticky? Or a lot more jokey, or have a lot more slapstick in it, but that's not what Donner wanted. So they fired Donner and replaced him with Richard Lester, who was given the job to make it a little bit more campy, and also to reshoot all or most of the already shot Donner scenes, which is, the reason why many scenes from the Donner cut are kind of the same, but not really. And if that wasn't even a big enough problem, due to the reshoots and, Richard Lester, being hired and, Donner being fired, Gene Hackman protested this by not showing up for any reshoots that were going to be done with Richard Lester. That's why, many of the scenes, or pretty much all of the scenes with Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor in Superman 2 are done by Donner and not by Lester. So those are Donner shot scenes, and any scene without Lex Luthor aren't. Most scenes, are done by Richard Donner that don't have Lex Luthor, but all the ones that have Lex Luthor are all Donner shot. And also, if that weren't bad enough, they also cut all of Marlon Brando's scenes out of Superman 2, which I think the movie definitely, the movie I think definitely suffered from that. Which I'll go into why later, because they cut his scenes out of the movie because they didn't want to pay him a lot of money if he were in the sequel. So they cut all of his scenes out and replaced him with Susanna York as both Jor-El's wife and Superman's mother, which, again, I think greatly hurt the movie. I think it's a father and son story, not a mother and the son story. And when Superman's, looking in the Fortress of Solitude and he screams father, doesn't really make much sense because he was only, talking to his mother the whole time. We never even heard mention of Jor-El anywhere. So that was kind of a, weird thing. But I'm going to be taking a look at the theoretical cut of Superman instead of the Richard Donner cut first. I will be looking at the Richard Donner cut, but I will be looking at the theoretical cut first because that was the one that came out first. So I might as well take a look at that. Now, I don't hate the theoretical cut of Superman 2, but I don't love it either. And I think most of that is because, we have the Richard Donner cut, and the Richard Donner cut is even better than the third movie. And I think everyone, says that same thing. I absolutely love the Donner cut way more because it feels more as an actual sequel, and it feels like more of an epic, awesome, and absolutely badass sequel than the other one does. Than the theoretical cut does, due to many of the slapstick, issues in the movie. And that is my main problem with the theoretical cut, the slapstick. But what bothers me the most about it is that it's brought up in the worst of scenes. Like whenever they have this really awesome, really, cool or dramatic moment, they always bring up the slapstick and they always bring up the jokes. And mind you, not all of them are bad. I just thought they were kind of out of place. And this is supposed to be a really dramatic, really, awesome Superman movie and a sequel to the other Superman movie. And it just feels very, jokey. It doesn't feel like it's being taken seriously. And a prime example of this is the Wind in Metropolis scene. The scene after Superman fights, the three Kryptonian criminals. They, use their, super breath to, blow everyone away from them, all the angered citizens. But what we saw previous to that scene was this giant, awesome, really cool battle, which is my favorite scene in the Lester cut. And then it's followed by slapstick, and that really, really, really bothered me. It's like this whole giant battle scene takes a backseat to jokes and slapstick and just people getting hurt, and it's like, it bothered me. Like, an example in this, this cut, the slapstick that follows after the awesome battle scene is, some guy has ice cream blown in his face, some dude's wig comes off, some chick's wig gets blown off, some guy in roller skates rolls down the road, or my personal favorite, which I think is the most ridiculous scene out of any superhero movie at all, is some guy in a phone booth calling someone and then having the phone booth tip over and having the phone booth fly being dragged down the road, and the guy is still talking on the phone. Alright, number one, how are you still able to talk on the phone if the phone booth is being dragged across the road? Like, wouldn't it get, cut off or whatever? Number two, that phone call cannot possibly be that important. Just hang up. Just hang up the phone. It cannot be possibly that important. And it's not like he says, I'll just call you back later. No. He's still talking to the fucking guy. He still is talking to him. You even hear him laughing with the conversation that this guy is having. And it can't possibly be that fucking important. He's not even worried. He's, almost completely oblivious to this. It's one of the most ridiculous scenes in this movie at all. And it just totally takes away from the tone. I mean, the guy, it's like... It was a dumb scene. I'm pretty sure if you told the guy that you were being blown by some dude in the middle of New York, he'd probably understand. I mean, yeah, I'd call back later too. I mean, it was a dumb scene. And that's my main problem with Superman 2. The Lester cut, not the Donner cut. My main problem with the Lester cut is that it just has slapstick in the most unnecessary of places, and especially that scene. It's like we had this giant, awesome, super cool, really epic battle, and then what follows it? Slapstick. In the Donner cut, it's, all the slapstick, all of that stuff happening is cut down substantially. And in the Lester cut, it felt so long and just so unneeded and just so unnecessary. And the Donner cut, it's actually cut to feel like it's a little bit more dark. Like, a lot of people are actually getting hurt. A lot of people are actually dying. And out of nowhere, just Superman comes out and just starts kicking everyone. Well, not really. He just flies away and he, flies away the Force of Solitude. But still, it's better than the one in the Lester cut. I didn't like the Lester cut. There was just so many different, slapsticky moments in this that just felt really kind of forced and just unnecessary. And that's just my big problem with it. Like, you had this huge, awesome battle scene, and what follows it, it's just jokes and slapstick, that. I mean, mind you, some of it was funny, but it just felt really unneeded and just really unnecessary. That's just personally what I don't like about the Lester cut. It didn't feel like an epic sequel to the first Superman movie that Donner wanted to make. He didn't want to make just another sequel that was, that could be completely on its own and you don't have to watch the first movie to understand. He wanted to make both movies back to back and make it just this one long epic, Superman epic movie. He wanted to make it a really good father-son story between Jor-El and Clark Kent. He really wanted to make this really big, awesome movie, and this just doesn't show that. It just shows oh, let's just throw in a bunch of jokes here and cut all that good stuff out of it. If you really want an awesome, really definitive, epic Superman, sequel, the Donner Cut is where you're gonna get it. Here, if you just want an action comedy, that's pretty much what you're gonna get here, with some, good acting. The acting in this movie is still great. Christopher Reeves as Clark Kent Superman is still great. Lois Lane, again, is really, really great. And Margot Kidder just brings a whole lot of life to the character. Same thing with Gene Hackman, who's probably one of the best things in this movie. He's the funniest part of this movie. If there's any slapstick that I actually laughed at, or there's any jokes that I actually did really admire, was from him. Or, Terrence Stamp as Zod, who is one of the most iconic villains in my opinion. He's the best, part in this. He's the best, thing in this movie. And I did like that they used these villains in this movie because it upped the ante. I mean, the last movie had Lex Luthor. This movie, you not only have pretty much three dark versions of Superman, but you also have those three villains and Lex Luthor. I thought they upped the ante perfectly. And Terrence Stamp as Zod is awesome. He has some of the best and funniest lines in this movie. And he's just such a likable character, even though he's a bad guy, even though he's destroying everything. He's just an awesome villain. And you get three awesome villains that is an awesome, first movie you just had this one dude who was a human that really couldn't do much. In this movie you have pretty much three versions of Superman, and they're evil, and plus you have Lex Luthor. That's awesome. That's just completely up in the ante, and I absolutely love that. But everything else, it really didn't feel like an epic Superman movie to me. It didn't feel like the epic sequel to the first movie, which really disappointed me. Again, these are some of the only times I've actually watched these movies, and I really was expecting this really triumphant, awesome, really cool, Superman movie, but I didn't really get that. I liked what I got. For what I got, I really did like. I really overall like this movie, and I do respect it because with all these problems at the production, all the production problems and controversy, it did do, it was good for, all the problems that it went through. But, as a sequel to the first movie, I just didn't like it. I just personally thought it was, okay as an action comedy. But, I personally thought it was, it was okay. And I'll probably give it, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 red suns. That's just personally what I, think. I also have some other minor problems with this movie. One is that they just started making up powers for both Superman and for the Kryptonian criminals. One of them being these little telekinesis beams where they can just lift shit up with their fingers because they can just throw out these little beams. It's I'm just gonna pick you up, which kind of begs the question, why don't they they use it twice in this movie and for completely just pointless reason. They do it just to pick up this one guy, and they do it to shoot Superman. Why not just use your heat vision? It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Why not just use heat vision if you're not gonna pick up Superman? You're just gonna shoot at him. It really makes much sense. And besides, it's not a made-up, it's just a completely made-up power, a really cool power, and probably a power that would be really useful, but it's not. They don't really use it all that much, and I really didn't like that. Also, the most infamous, one of the most infamous, where Superman takes the S and just throws it at a guy, and it captures him in it. The cellophane S, which Family Guy made fun of, which was kind of funny, one of the only funny jokes in Family Guy. Apparently Superman can rip off parts of his, costume and, throw it at people. What? At least the telekinesis beams, yeah, that kind of makes sense, but just throwing the S, why doesn't just Superman just, get some rope and throw it at him? It's like Kryptonian rope, it ties itself. Why does he just throw the S shield on his chest, and it's, cellophane, it's that was stupid. That still is stupid. One of the dumbest moments in any superhero movie, in my opinion. Or, the other most, or, when Superman is, there's multiple projections of Superman in the Fortress of Solitude. I mean, maybe you can explain that, because it's the Fortress of Solitude. Maybe he has, a bunch of projectors everywhere. But it just seems kind of weird. Superman, you can apparently be Loki. You can just make different versions of yourself that aren't real. That's kind of cool. Why don't you use that all the time? Why don't you go get this other Superman dude to, stop a bank robbery when you're just sitting down watching TV? That'd be kind of cool. That'd be come in handy. I mean, come on. Or the most infamous, or one of the most infamous, depending, doesn't really matter, is the mind-erasing kiss, which there is not a single person I think out there that can actually explain this. This makes no damn sense at all. I mean, he kisses someone, and then some of their mind is erased. Like, how does that work? Again, I'll probably put a link in the description to refer you to the Nostalgia Critic's Top 11 Dumbest Superman Moments, and in his video, he's like, how does that work? Like, does his tongue, like, work into their brain or something like that? Why doesn't he just, like, lobotomize them with his heat vision? I mean, yeah, that'd be dark, but at least it would make sense. Like, oh, I'm just gonna kiss you, and you lose your mind. Again, like the Nostalgia Critic said in his Top 11 Dumbest Superman Moments, why didn't you just use that all the time? Why didn't you just use that to erase all villains' like memory? That would just end everything. Like, just out of nowhere. But this is kind of, you know, I guess, what did I write? I'm sorry. The reason this is in here, the mind erasing kiss, it's kind of justified because of, they wanted, like I said, they wanted to use the spinning the world back in time bit from the first movie, but that was in the first movie when it was supposed to be in the second movie, so they had to make up a completely different ending to, you know, help Lois forget that Superman is Clark Kent, or that Clark Kent is Superman. You know, so it kind of is justified, but they really couldn't make up a better thing. Like, really, why didn't you just have him spin the world back around again? Like, yeah, it would have been a cop-out, but at least it would have made some sense. Well, actually, no, because it still doesn't make any sense in the context that's used in the first movie, but it is in the context used in this movie, in the Donner cut. So, that's pretty much my thoughts on the Richard Lester version of Superman. I don't hate it. I just want to stretch to you guys, I don't hate it. I do really like it, but it just doesn't feel like the definitive, really awesome follow-up to the first Superman movie. That is the Donner cut, and I'll go into more about that when I review the Donner cut for you guys. But for right now, the Richard Lester theoretical version of Superman 2 gets a 7.5 or 7.5 out of 10 Red Suns. I know, that may disappoint a lot of people, but I still did like some stuff in here. The action in this movie is amazing. There was a lot more action in this movie than there was in the first Superman movie, especially with the Kryptonian criminals of General Zod Ursa Anon. General Zod is an awesome villain, and I can't wait to see Michael Shannon kick the shit out of Superman in Man of Steel. I cannot wait to see an even more badass version of Zod in Man of Steel. He was badass in this movie, and I'm so happy to see Michael Shannon play Zod in Man of Steel. The action in this movie was great. The whole battle in Metropolis was my favorite scene in the entire movie, but it just didn't feel like an epic Superman movie sequel to the first Superman movie, and I didn't get that until the Richard Donner cut. So, you know, I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10 Red Suns. And, you know, that may, you know, disappoint a lot of people, but I just liked this. I just liked the Donner cut a little bit more. Just pretty much what they took out from the Donner cut, pretty much what they took out of, you know, the Richard Donner stuff, definitely greatly just, you know, made this movie suffer, and I really didn't like that. And I'll go into why about that when I review Superman, the Richard Donner cut, after this video. So that said, right now where Superman 2, the Richard Lester version stands at 7.5 out of 10 Red Suns. May disappoint a lot of people, but again, it's my opinion. If you like it, then, you know, that's fine. Again, I don't hate it. I really want to stretch that. I really don't hate this movie, but I just have a lot of problems with it, such as the tone and the mix between slapstick and the drama. It just clashes, and it definitely doesn't blend well together. And it very much, probably because it was filmed by it was filmed by one guy and another guy, and this one guy was told to finish this other guy's work, so it just didn't work in my opinion. I still liked it, I still am giving it a fair rating, but it definitely just doesn't hold up in my opinion. So that said, I'll see you guys next time I review the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. And I'll definitely give that movie a higher rating than this. That said, I'll be back with my review of Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. So I'll see you then.